Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to look at how you can integrate hand raises into the visuals of your production when you're working with remote Zoom guests or viewers. And we think this will basically focus a lot on how do you increase engagement with people? How do you make them feel a part of whatever type of production that you are putting on? So, but before we get to that, I'd like to invite everybody, please, if you have any questions, have any comments, just post them below and we'll try to get to everything live here on the show. Also, if you'd like to call in, we do have a link in the show notes and here on the screen that will let you connect with somebody in the studio and we can get you here on air with us. So, as a quick start, I just want to give you a sense of what we're actually looking at having as a UI for this example that we're doing here today. So here I have a host that would be talking to people, and this would be sort of your standard shot on the show here. So let's see if we get that up. There we go. So now, if somebody in the Zoom community were to raise a hand, so I'll just raise a hand over here, you now see that that comes up and that person's name will appear. I then have the ability to sort of go and say, okay, let me take and put this person into one of our channels here. Let's do this. And then I can, from there, I could turn around and say, okay, let me see a 2-box now with the person that just raised their hand and the host. If I'm done, I can go back. If there were more questions, you would see everybody that had their hand raised there. And then if somebody lowers their hand, that will just go away and slide out of the way. So this creates an immediate framework for that type of audience engagement. As soon as they raise their hand, they get that visual cue. It's not just, oh, somewhere in the background something is happening, but it gives them that sort of visceral, I'm connected to this. When I raise my hand, that's everybody sees that. And I think that creates a really strong dynamic for making that audience feel a part of the production. So before we get into how we did all that, we just have a few comments here. So you is saying, hi, you, always good to see you here. Thank you for joining us. And Bill, thank you. I love that you guys are a part of these shows every week, and I really appreciate the comments. So thank you. Okay, so let's talk a little about the different components that I have in here. So first is that we have LiveToAirZ. So let me just bring that up over here so you can see that. So we have LiveToAirZ, and that is connected to the Zoom meeting that we have set up. In LiveToAirZ, let me just show you, we have this ability to filter people by hand raise. So I can go in and see everybody that's filtered, and here's the guest that I just put in, so I can sort of clear them and put them back in here. So now, if I have somebody that has a hand raise, all I have to do is select hand raise over here, and when I raise a hand inside of Zoom, when the guest raises a hand, they will just show up here. So it's a very simple way to create that hand raise dynamic. And then we have this connected to vMix, and we do that connection 2 different ways. So first, we have a connection through metadata. So we have scripts that are reading the metadata that's published by LiveToAirZ, which is basically just looking at the Zoom meeting it's connected to and pulling all the metadata about all of the participants, not just those that are on screen, not just those that are being fed out as video, but all of the participants. So it gives you this way to engage with people, even if they are not directly connected at the present moment to your production. So that's sort of the first thing. And so if you look at how we did this, I'm going to just back this out for a second, and this will go away. So you can see that right now I did not have a hand raise. So if I go and I do this hand raise, it now shows up, and you can see this coming out of vMix as our output. And then if I have this person here and the host is ready, I can just assign them to a channel, and I can say, okay, put that up now in a 2-box, and that person slides on. So it's a very simple way to have this direct engagement with people. And just to take this to the next, if I do a second hand raise over here, so if I go back and say, okay, let me look here, and there are now 2 people. And if I turn around and lower my hand and I just have the 1, I can actually now go and just take the next person that I asked and come down and just say, replace the person that's in the question slot now with this other person. And now they're there. And when I go and say, do the 2-box, now I have my next questioner participant in the shot here. So this gives us sort of like visually, you can see how this all works. And from a workflow, it's really just looking at the hand raises, and based on whatever the host is saying, if they say, I want to talk to Beck, or I want to talk to John, or whatever, you can just put the right person into the output channel and then pull them in the 2-box. And sort of clearing this out, when the last person is done and we no longer have hands raised, that just goes away and you're done. Now, one of the really cool things is that when you're working with Zoom, if somebody raises their hand and then they start to talk and have like an extended talk, it'll lower the hand automatically. So this way, if you bring people on and then talk to them, you don't even have to ask them to lower their hands or do anything like that. The system will do that automatically. So you sort of get that hand lowered, they'll come off the side, you won't see them there anymore. And then when you've finished answering everybody's questions or talking with everybody who had a point to make, you'd be able to go and have this operating pretty much with very little intervention to give you this type of look. And you've noticed that all of this stuff is happening automatically. I'm not pressing a lot of keys. When I press a key, it's to raise a hand, and everything else you see on screen is happening basically through scripting. And then the only thing I need to do is say, do I want to bring that guest on to ask a question, that participant on, or not at that point in time? And that's the only thing I need to do to interact with the production piece of this, as opposed to just participant piece. Okay, so that gives you sort of the overall sense now of how this all comes together. So let's start by looking at what we actually have in vMix, and we'll sort of go through that piece of the equation here. So inside vMix, we have a few very basic elements here. So we have the host, and then we have the feed that's coming from LiveToAirZ. So if I clear this out, you can see that's just color bars here with the feed from that first channel. I then have an overlay, which is everything that's going to be for the questions, and that's a GT title. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But then we just have a background that sort of sits behind it. It's just little X's and a hash pattern that gives you a little bit of dynamics in the background. And then I have 3 box formats. One is the host, where they're just in a small box, and that's everything that you see from the single shot of the host. Then we have the host slid over. And when we do this slide over, we actually trigger through one of the triggers here an overlay for everybody that has their hand raised. So this way, this goes on screen, and then you put the overlay on with the hand raises, which triggers the animations for each of the guests to slide in on the side. So that's the second sort of multi-box input that we have. And then the last one is our 2-box. Now, that is really, pretty simple in terms of how everything is set. But what allows this to function the way it does is that inside each of these, we have sets of triggers that will start and stop scripts. Start scripts when they start up and stop them when they go away. So let me just go back here. I'm looking at the one box, which has the host talking. And so what I trigger is a script that sits there and says, are there any questions? Does anybody have their hand raised? And that's its only job. And when it sees somebody with their hand raised, then it'll turn around and say, okay, let's display the hand raises. And it does that all in scripting. For the box with the host and the questioners, and the questions on the side, we have 4 different triggers we use. So when it comes in, on the transition in, we wait 300 milliseconds and put up that side box, which slides in all the guests. And we then start a script which says, now that we slid that box in, we have to go and make sure we are sort of activating everything that needs to happen in that GT title. And that's what the raised hands does. It basically keeps looking, saying, if there are still hands raised, I'll still keep this box out, and I'll still make sure that I update everything so you see everybody who has a hand raised. And finally, when nobody has their hand raised, then it says, okay, let's go back to just the host showing. Excuse me, I have allergies, so I have to apologize if I'm coughing a bit here or sound a bit raspy. But that's basically how a lot of this animation happens, through a much simpler mechanism than having scripts drive all this dynamic change. It's simply the scripts are looking for specific events and just touching the GT title, basically, as well as reading the metadata from LiveToAirZ. So that's basically everything that we have going through the vMix side. So it is a very straightforward model for how you want to do everything with sort of processing things outside of the script. So let me just jump in before we get in, because the next piece I'll jump in is to talk about the scripts, but we have just a couple more comments here. So Jesus Full Gospel Assembly, thank you. I appreciate you joining us. I really do. So, and Bill, so he's saying he lives vicariously through Streaming Alchemy. Oh, Bill, I'm sorry that this is your outlet here, but thank you. I really appreciate that. That's very nice of you to say. So thank you. Okay, so I think next I want to talk about the scripting that we have here. And to start, what I'm actually going to show you is what we're reading with the script to generate the different actions that we're taking. So inside, and I'll sort of go in here and we'll show it over here on the left screen. In the about, we have something which says show XML metadata. And so if you click here, this will open up a screen which basically has all the metadata that's coming from the Zoom meeting that the LiveToAirZ is connected to. And we are actually looking at one piece of this called user info for this case here. And so inside user info, we're going to be looking at, so we have the username. So that's the name that we display when we slide out the slider. There's a lot of other details here, but the other element we're looking at is this one right here, which says, is this person's hand raised? So this gives us, again, something that we can work with to say, now I know if it's true or false. And this is just sort of connected to, the basic constructs that we have of XML. So these are things that we've done in past shows. So all we're going to do is we're going to use this user info information to pull the name of the user and their status. Is their hand raised or not? And this is, as I mentioned, this is for every user, regardless of how they're connected. If they've joined the meeting, we have this information for all of the users in the meeting. And this means I can do things which we actually just grabbed a few times as examples in the script. But I could do things like say, what % of the people have actually agreed? If I say, if you think that we should be doing X, raise your hand. I could come back and say, this is the total number of participants and this is the percentage that agreed. So you get certain things that give you that sort of dynamic elements you can use with hand raises by just knowing that I'm looking at everybody across the entire meeting participant base and not just some select few that I've put into slots inside LiveToAirZ. So with that sort of as our backdrop, let's look at the scripts. And I'll sort of jump here and we'll start. So the first script that we had was when we had the host up and there was the full, the full screen sort of box of just the host talking. And so when that starts up, it runs this script that says, are there any questions? So in doing this, it's very, very straightforward, and it's going to be the model that we use for the larger script as well. So we are looking at that location, which if you remember, that was where I opened it up in the browser. That is this location, which is just pulling the metadata from LiveToAirZ. And so it takes that as the URL, opens a XML document, which we call XML LTAZ. And then it basically pulls that information in. That's what these two lines are doing. It's basically pulling that information as a string. So it opens up as a web client, basically says pull that and take that information in and effectively make this thing into a string. And this is what we're going to be using these for. So I start out by saying there are no hands raised. We'll just sort of make that assumption going in. And then we just go into a loop in the background. And we loop through this and say, okay, let me download all that XML data from that URL that we have up here. And we put that into XML content. And then we load that XML into XML LTAZ. And from there, we're just doing a very simple select node. And this is going to basically be two parts. So I go in there and say, select all the nodes in XML LTAZ that have user info as the predicate, and that are is hand raised equals true. So I'm putting sort of a condition in this. So create an XML list, that a node list, that basically has every user that has their hand raised, and then give me the count of that. So all I'm doing is saying, I just want to count. I don't really want everybody yet. I'm just seeing, does anybody have their hand raised? That's all I want now. And if not, I just sleep for 1 second and then go back. And if the hands raised is greater than 0, I exit the loop. If not, it keeps drying and waits till somebody raises their hand. When somebody does raise their hand, it goes down here and does one simple function that basically says, okay, now merge into that 2 box, which had the host with the column on the side where I'm going to display everybody who has their hand raised. And that's it. So that's all this is doing. It just runs in the background behind that host. For the other piece to this now, when I have that 2 box up, we said that the first thing we're doing with a trigger is we're putting that overlay on. So that brings up that GT title that we have on the side. And that GT title basically has inside a GT title, a set of pages inside the GT title that have each one of those guests. So it does the first 9 hand raises that you'd have there. There could be more, but it's only showing the first 9. And so if people drop off, it will sort of fill in the rest. But that filled in that whole side piece on the side. So what we're doing with this is very, very similar. We are now going to open up the same document, and we're going to just do a few more things. So I had things I mentioned with total participants, everybody that's in the meeting, how many, how many hands are raised, how many hands were raised in the last previously, so I got to know are there new hand raised or not. So we sort of take care of that. And then some of these variables are really just around pointing to which one of these pages do we want to use inside of GT title to display those little bars along the side. And that's everything that we have here. And this says the max number of slots we have along the side is 9. So it knows, oh, don't go beyond 9 if you're going to fill anything in. So then basically for, technical, in case there's a technical fault, something can't be read, whatever, we do a try catch inside this. Not going to go into that here, but that's something that we covered it in the past. And so again, same thing. Let's take and open that XML from the web URL. And that's what we have these for. And we just get that into that and do that right here. Same beginning, just loading it in. And we basically do the same thing. First, I get the count of total hands raised. And in this case, because I mentioned it before, this tells you what's the total number of participants in the meeting here. And that's total participants here. So that would give us the ability to do other interesting things. And I just want to include that in case you wanted to start to modify this. That gave you a start point to work for things where it's like, okay, let me show everybody versus, the people who had a specific type of reaction, like a hand raise, and work with that. So that should give you that, but that's what we have here. And then the first thing we do, because this can happen, like if you have somebody where you had a 2-box shot with the host and a questioner, when you go back to this screen, this may start up and there may not be any more hands raised. So you're at this screen, but with no hands raised because you jump back to say, okay, let's go back and see if there are any more questions. So when that happens, all we're doing here is we're saying, okay, let's go and jump back. And so this hands raised, we have a page 10, and I'm going to, let me just put a stop here for 1 second. I'm going to be doing another video talking specifically about how we set up the GT title for this. And we're going to do that as a pre-recorded video. So we'll go into a lot of detail about how all the pages were set up and how we did the animations for them. But the goal here, more than anything, is to just recognize that what we're doing at page 10 is we're blanking out the screen. There are no more guests to show. So we blank out the screen. And then I just merge back to the 1 box. So I'm basically going to say, we're here. There's no more guest questions. So let's just slide back and go to the host in the 1 box. And again, that has its own script looking for people to raise their hands again. So that's our first stop in this script. Then we are just going here and saying, if there are more raised hands than there were last time, then we just have to animate those new raised hands on. And the way it works is each hand raise that we display on screen is a separate page in the GT title. So each one of those things that slide out is just another page layout that we have set up. And that's all we're doing. So we're saying, go from where we are, and add the next N number of people that have now raised their hand in addition. And that's, again, very simple. And it uses the title begin animation, which is how you work with GT title animations if you want to do things and work with pages more specifically. And it is very simple. It's just because this is a for loop, we're just going here and we're turning around and saying, take the page, and we're converting whatever the slot, that's what that's basically is a page counter, is in our for loop. So we just append that to it, and it executes the command for us. Again, this stuff will all be posted up in the link in the show notes, so you'll be able to go through this in a lot more detail. And then we just wait 500 milliseconds before animating the next one, because we want to sort of give each person with a hand raise sliding on some minimum amount of time on screen as sort of the focus of the animation. So that's what we do if there are more hands raised. And if there were less hands raised, then all we're going to do is one of two things. If the less hands raised has gotten us down to 0, then we do what we did up in the beginning. We just turn around and say, okay, blank out everything on the side. We don't have any hands raised, and go back to the single host in a box. And that will just keep looking. Or we'll go and we'll jump directly to say, if there's only 4 guests up there now as opposed to 6 because people took the hand raised down or whatever, then we'll just jump right to that page with just the 4 guests, and it will do its animation for that. Because I didn't have a direct, easy way to sort of slide guests off as we dealt with them. That could be something that I'd look at, in the future as a different way to do that with a little more complexity. But I wanted to try to focus more on the technique with scripting rather than, every potential way to create a visual. But so that's all we're doing. So we either are rotating in one page at a time to sort of grow the list, or if there were fewer guests, then we just jump back to that and say that's who's remaining. And that's how we have that set up here. And again, a lot of these are just API function calls. The amount of things that we're doing around XML are really very tiny. I mean, we're just getting counts, getting names, things of that sort. So that's what we do then. And so we say, now that I know the number of hands raised, now I set that to the raised hands previous, which is like, okay, when I go back and check, this is how I know are more hands raised or fewer hands raised, and do the correct logic here. And wait 2 seconds, and then we go back and continue the loop. So not very complex scripting, but actually very, very powerful with the types of things that you can do with this. And I think that's the key thing here. We're all about, creating ways to do engagement. And so if you have, an audience, whether it's, through Zoom or any other thing, making them feel a part of a production, making them feel like their voice matters and they can engage with you, I think is really critical here. And that's what we're doing with this. This can work, and we did this here with hand raises, but there are a lot of other elements that are a part of this. So inside of Zoom, you can do different types of reactions, hand claps, thumbs up, things of that sort. So you could actually just pick these things to do voting and other stuff, and use this to do something which has dynamic voting on, the different sides, or bars with percentages that sort of move to say, 40% say this, 60% say that. So some very interesting things you can do to engage with your audience using the tools that they have baked into Zoom to do these types of interactive communications with you. So they have this, they have things that they can do with messages and other stuff. And that's really what we focused on today. How do you take and work with hand raises, but the general concepts apply to any of those things that you may want to do here. All right. So let me wrap this up. I know we have a couple more comments here, so let me just jump on and get that. So thank you. I am not sure I would do a good pronunciation, but Jatukain. Sorry if I have not said that correctly. I do apologize, but my heart is in the right place, and I am grateful for you joining us here. Thank you. And we have Bill. Yes, so let me talk a bit about that, because I just want to share this with everybody. I've got some medical things that are going to be going on in the month of June, later this month. So I'm not going to be able to do a show for probably most of June after this. And I wanted to make sure that we stayed at least a bit connected during this time. So I will, before I go in for stuff, basically pull this video together, which shows everything we did on the GT title side. And that will at least keep us connected, even though I can't make it live. So my next show here on Streaming Alchemy will be a pre-recorded sort of premiere that we'll schedule before everything. And, that will come up. And then when I'm back and running again, I can come back and sort of answer any questions and do sort of a Q&A if there's anything that people have that are, regarding how we set up the GT title and what we did with that. So, all right. I think that will be a wrap for today. After the show, I'll get everything put up on our shared drive for this, and you can download it and play with it. And as I always ask, if you do something interesting, share it with the community, and let's see what you're doing. So If you are going to be around in 2 weeks, we will have the premiere for the new video. If you can and you'd like to ask any questions or just hang out in the post-show hangout, very, very happy to have you there as well. So whatever, until we connect again, whether that's in a moment or in 2 weeks, thank you. Be safe, be well. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the post show. So, Bill, thank you very much. I do appreciate that. It's just some more stuff. I mean, everybody probably knows I had a heart attack about a year ago, almost exactly. And there's just a couple more things they need to do, from a procedure point of view, that I got to go and, to get some procedures done in the hospital. So this is going to just take me out for, right in the middle of June for a bit of time. So I just, I try to be very open with everybody. You guys are wonderful in, joining me every show, and I really appreciate that. So I just want to, be as transparent as I can with all of you as well for what's going on this side. So thank you, Bill. So a couple of things that, and I mentioned them at the end, but looking at what we're doing here as a mechanism for general engagement, I think is the key takeaway from our show today. I wanted to do something where, as an audience, as a group of participants that are sort of watching you, engaging with you, learning from you, however you have it set up, that you have some way that when they take an action, that becomes very transparent. And so everybody feels like, gee, by just raising my hand or a thumbs up or whatever, I now have a platform and a voice in this production. They feel more part of it. Very similar to comments and everything else, but actually far more powerful, because it allows you to do things like voting, like contests, other things that are really interesting, that might be cool ways to work with the metadata that Zoom provides, and to engage with your audience, because I think that's really where everything is. So, yeah. So, Bill, yes, you're quite welcome. As I said, it's not something that I'm concerned about, but it's just something that needs to get done. So I want to get it done. So, Tom, thank you very much. Tom Sinclair, I appreciate you joining. And clearly, if any of you need Zoom, if any of you need streaming systems put together, Tom is definitely a resource you should look into. He shares a lot on his own Streaming Idiots broadcast, as well as, commercially he has, he's been building streaming rigs for a lot of folks in the community. So definitely somebody to know if you aren't familiar with Tom already. So let's see. So Jesus Full Gospel Assembly saying, can you do a feature on how live view get the metadata from Zoom? Yeah, I mean, okay, let me actually jump, because I didn't cover this when I covered the everything I was doing inside of vMix. So if I actually switch back to vMix, I can do a very quick overview of what we have set up here. So inside of vMix, I actually set up Data Sources Manager. And this is how I get things for raised hands. So this is everybody that has their hands raised. And what I'm doing is I come here and say, this is, if you remember, this is the URL that we have set up. So we're just doing this straight in vMix. And this is basically exactly what you saw inside of the script that we did, where you have user info is raised hand equals true, but in this case, it's pulling the username. So I'm asking for one more piece of information. So not only is it just finding everybody that has a hand raised, but it's coming back and creating a list of usernames. So if I have this now, well, this is up. Let me just raise the hands on the other folks in here. And now you can see that that's getting added. So all I'm doing to pull this data out is I'm getting it right from Data Sources Manager inside of vMix. And I'm just using like I said, this is straight XML. This is an XPath. You can look it up. One of the things that some of the AI tools out there can do a decent job of is if you give it XML and ask for XPaths, it will go back and tell you, a valid XPath. Don't use that so much for code, but it'll give you nicely formatted non-functioning code is my experience with most of that. But this will give you the ability to pull out any data that you want inside of your Zoom session and your Zoom meeting. And so all of that data, there is a lot of data that is inside that Zoom session. So let me switch back here to, let's see if I open the interface over here. So if we just do a quick look here, I have everything about, is it got video? Is it got audio? Is it muted? Are they in the waiting room? So you would know, so you could actually have guests that are sitting outside and you'd be able to turn around and show who are the next guests that you could bring into a meeting. So lots of different things. If they're talking. So this will come back and say, if this person is actively speaking, you'll get that information, which you could use to do things that have switching in it potentially. I really don't know how quickly it will respond for some of the stuff, but there is a lot of information that's in here. And this is just for, the specific users in the meeting. We have different information for users that are assigned to channels. So you can say, do things for user in channel 1, channel 2, but everything is here. And you're either going to be working with it like I showed in the scripts, where you're going to be pulling it out and doing some logic around it with scripting, or you're going to be pulling it in through GT title and then, adding that to elements that you display on screen, because once you have it in Data Source Manager, and once you have it in Data Source Manager, you can then populate things in GT title to leverage that as visuals. So definitely a lot of data here. We will probably add more over time as different data elements become available to us. And, there may be some things we decide, we can add that we calculate or sort of provide as value add. But the goal here is thinking about it in terms of participants in a meeting and how you can know more about them so you can do more with them. All right. So, but, to answer your question, Jesus Full Gospel Assembly, we can do something, when we will continue to do stuff that will talk a lot more about leveraging this metadata. And, hopefully this gave you an initial, I can start to work with it, but we'll be doing a lot more. And we want to make that sort of available as pre-canned scripts that you can modify. So if you're going to be using LiveToAirZ for anything and working with Zoom Productions, this will give you a way to do that. All right. Okay. So we are probably in a good place to wrap things up here. And just so you know, we will be doing sort of our official LiveToAirZ release next Tuesday. It is now sort of soft released, but we'll be making an official announcement. And the folks, I just want to mention, the folks from Zoom have been phenomenal in giving us support and encouragement to get everything we're doing out. So I just want to do a shout out to Andy and his team for everything they've been doing for us. Definitely appreciate it. So I guess we're going to call this a wrap. As I said, I will do a pre-recorded show in 2 weeks. So that will be June 20th. And then hopefully we will get back to our live shows at the beginning of July. So until then, everybody be safe, be well. See ya.